Alrighty then, boys and girls, soon it is going to be your NEBOSH NG1 exam, IG1 exam, maybe your NG or IG2 practical project. I promised that I would do a Q&A and answer your questions on anything NEBOSH related, and I have received quite a few questions. So let's get right into it. My name is Will Taylor. I'm the founder and director of Compassa, and we deliver the world's only interactive video courses for NEBOSH and IOSH qualifications. So the first question comes from Billy B. Ball 9421, and he asked, how best to answer a question on moral justification for managing health and safety? So we've got a few of these questions about specific topics. And so what I'm going to say to all of those is, firstly, the answer depends on the scenario. You are probably going to have to use evidence from the scenario to justify, because this is what the question's about, what is the moral justification? Can you make moral arguments to justify your health and safety proposals? Those arguments are probably going to depend on the scenario. That said, our exam technique, which we teach to all of our students, is that you should go and research your answers. So where do we research? Well, one of the places you can do some research is in your course materials. Here are the Compassa course materials. We've got a question, we've got a tutorial on morals and money. It's the first section of the course. We've got a whole video on the topic. And firstly, we've got a page here on the moral duty to prevent harm. So one of the basically the generic things you could say in a question on moral justification is every employer has a moral duty to prevent their employees from being harmed by work. They have a moral duty to take reasonable precautions to lower the risk to a reasonable level. That's just a basic moral duty. There's also a societal expectation. Society expects that organizations do not sacrifice health and safety in the pursuit of profit or savings. So there is a society-wide expectation that we look after our people. Now those are fairly generic arguments that you could make, and they might be worth a mark. A more specific argument might relate to what we can see here. These are the moral consequences of poor health and safety standards. So poor standards of safety will result in injuries, ill health, pain, suffering, disabilities, death even, ill health, medical costs, lost earnings for the employees, which means difficulties for families, financial difficulties. It might result in longer-term mental health harms, loss of confidence, loss of self-esteem, loss of enjoyment, not being able to play with your kids, and so on. I mean, just basically all of the bad stuff that can happen to people. So one of the moral justifications is if you as an employer have low standards of health and safety, and those low standards result in these things, then you are morally responsible. You're morally responsible for the pain, the suffering, the death, the injuries, the harms, and so on, and you don't want that on your conscience. So in the scenario, you might find possible examples that you could use, and you could link it to some of these things. You could say, well, listen, if we fixed the car park or the warehouse racking or whatever it is, we would reduce the risk of collapses and injuries, which would reduce the risk of pain and suffering and death and disability and all of that. So as part of your moral justification, you could talk about each one of these points that you can see on the screen right here, and then link that to the scenario. Now, I'm not saying that all of these points are mark-worthy. I can't give you a marking scheme for the question because the marking scheme depends on the scenario, okay? These are just a list of generic things that you might be able to talk about. Everything depends on the scenario. Next question has been asked by one of our fans, actually. This is a person who comments quite frequently, Sci-Fry 1974, and I'm not sure if this is an NG2 related question or not, but it's about hazards and what seems to be risk assessment. So hazard is worker overreaching on stepladder and climbing on racking system. Would you recommend two separate hazards? So it would be 1, overreaching on stepladders, and 2, climbing the racking system. Great question. Should we separate hazards into different parts? there's a problem here with the question. The problem is this shows a lack of understanding of what a hazard actually is. Overreaching on a stepladder is not a hazard. It's a hazardous thing to do. It's a hazardous behavior, a dangerous behavior, unsafe behavior, but it is not the hazard. It's just one of the many ways in which you could interact dangerously with a hazard. The hazard is the stepladder. That's the hazard. And you're not just going to fall off of the stepladder by overreaching. You could fall off the stepladder in all kinds of different ways. You could fall off it by, say, having a faulty stepladder. You could put it on unstable ground. You could carry too many things up it. You could stand right at the top of the stepladder. There's loads of different ways you can hurt yourself with a stepladder. You could get knocked off it by someone walking past, someone opening a door. So we're not risk assessing one specific situation. We identify a hazard, not a situation. We identify a hazard, and then we assess the risks from that hazard. So let me show you how this would work. If I get an NG2, this is a risk assessment form here. Again, and I don't want to tell you what to write on your NG2, but here I would put something down like use of stepladders. That's more of a hazard, okay? Now, you're on about the overreaching. Well, where would the overreaching go? Well, the overreaching would go in the how. We've got this section here on how you might be harmed. And so one of the hows might be, warehouse workers are known to overreach on step ladders, which could result in a fall. Okay, so now we've covered that overreaching part of it. Now, it's not just the only situation. You could talk about some other situations as well. Other situations could include being knocked off, faulty ladders, collapsing, or standing at the top of the ladder. So in this who might be harmed and how box, we have to get a who in there, and we've got it here. We've got warehouse worker. And then we describe the how. So the how is the incident, the situation which leads to the injury. But we also have to put the injury in. Falls could result in broken bones and disabilities. Okay, so quite a serious injury there. Now, I'm not particularly happy with the description of the hazard there, use of step ladders. I think it should be a little bit more specific, or we could maybe put the height of the step ladder, because there's a difference between a 1 meter step ladder and a 5 meter step ladder. So let's put something down like up to 2 meters high, something like that. Do not forget your hazard category as well. So the hazard category here is working at height. There we are, hazard category. Oh, there we are, use of step ladders up to 2 meters high. Done. Now we've got the climbing on the racking situation, and you are absolutely correct. I think we should separate the step ladders from the racking. They are two completely different things. Now, they're climbing on the racking. That's work at height, isn't it? Well, they shouldn't be climbing on the racking, should they? They shouldn't be, okay? It's not a hazard climbing on racking. Racking is the hazard. Being at height, I suppose, on the racking is a hazard. But really, what we want to be risk assessing here is racking. Racking. Use of racking. Use of racking. How high is the racking? Well, the racking might be 5 meters high or something. Use of racking up to 5 meters high. What do we do with racking? To store what? To store what? Pallets or something? To store pallets of goods. Okay, so that's a hazard. Now, climbing on the racking is one problem, but there are lots of other problems with racking. You might have vehicles crashing into it, knocking it over, overloading the racking so it collapses. You might have forklifts not putting things on the racking properly and loads falling down, or knocking things and things falling down. So you've got falling objects, collapsing of racking, and people climbing on the racking. Quite a few different issues there. So we've got warehouse workers could be injured by falling objects which are dislodged. Try to avoid the typos, although it's not a problem if there's the occasional typo in your project. NEBOSH's sample has typos in it as well, which are dislodged. Racking could collapse if overloaded or knocked over by a vehicle, workers may be tempted to climb the racking and could fall. All of these could result in head injuries, crushing, and fatality. Okay, so we've got a who, we've got a how, and we've got the injury. I don't think the who is really good enough. You could say warehouse workers and others in the area. Now, you've said that people climb the racking. That's clearly a problem. Why don't we address that problem in the control measures? You know they're climbing it, right? So in this column here, what further controls and actions are required? We need to completely ban or do something to prevent people climbing the racking. So it could be brief all warehouse operatives on prohibition on climbing racking. And it's like, why are they climbing the racking? Well, they need to get up there for some reason. So why don't we give them some equipment? Why don't we give them some equipment to help them climb up the racking? Provide suitable airplane type steps to so workers can reach parts without needing to climb the racking. And perhaps why don't we do some monitoring to make sure the steps are being used rather than people climbing. Implement monitoring of safe behaviors, targeting people, or not targeting people, that sounds a bit harsh, doesn't it? Safe behaviors to ensure people work safely and do not climb racking. So you could do something like that, and don't forget to address the other racking issues like the collapsing of the racking, the overloading of the racking. So you want to get things in there like, you know, signage, making sure it's suitably stable and it's designed to take the load, racking inspections on a regular basis, racking protection at the bottom as well. Now, what hazard category is this? Well, this sounds to me like a falling object issue, and stacking, racking, storage is covered in the syllabus in the working at height. Is it work at height or working at height? Not entirely sure it matters, as long as it's clear that is the hazard category. So there you are, Sci-Fry 1974. That one is for you. I hope that is helpful. Let's take a look at the next one. The next one is this is by Omer Wab 744. I failed both IG1 and 2. I'm sorry, very sorry to hear that. Next 17th of January, I have open book examination. Please give us some techniques for the IG1 and how to answer. Certainly, I can certainly do that. And this is going to be a really quick one because we already have a ton of videos here in a playlist. So if I were just to go to our page, you've got our page right here. NG1 exam technique. So you go to the playlists, NG1 exam tips, click into there, and you can see here, we've got a ton of videos here, loads of videos. As many tips as you can handle. Go through those. Best of luck with your IG1 and your IG2. Next question is by Yorkshire. Yeah, Yorkshire, God's own country. Yorkshire MT09. Is exam technique the biggest factor in the NG1? Great question. I think it's extremely important, but it is not the only thing. I would say 50% of your chances of success are down to exam technique, so about half. That being said, you could have excellent exam technique, but if the answer you are providing is not on the marking scheme, then you're not going to get a mark, regardless of how good your exam technique is. So the things that you say must be on the marking scheme that the examiner has. And then using your exam technique, you should make your point, use evidence from the scenario, and explain yourself to the required standard. And so you could make points that are on the marking scheme, but if you're not explaining it to the required standard, then you're still not going to get the mark. So it's a combination of exam technique and getting the mark-worthy points down. So for that, you do have to read the question and understand the question in the way that it's intended. Next question is stolen oxygen. Thank you for your question. Hey Will, how would you recommend I become proficient at expanding my answers into mark-worthy comments rather than directly answering the question with a few words or a statement? Okay, so how do we expand our answers? Well, this is where I'm going to talk about the P technique, the P principle. So let's take a look at one of NEBOSH's exam papers. This is their sample paper. So this is on their website. It's nothing confidential here. Let's say, here's one. So why should near misses be investigated? What arguments can you give to convince the committee to investigate this car park near miss? 10 marks. So you need to make at least 10 arguments, but ideally you want to be making like 12, 13, 15, something like that, to make sure that you get the full marks available, if you can. So how would we do it? Well, we're going to use the P principle. P stands for point, evidence, and explanation. And we're going to try to give 10 answers at least, which have a point, some evidence, and some further explanation. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing I like to do is I like to write out a list of points. It's like a shopping list of very short answers. And it sounds to me, reading your comment, it sounds to me that you can do that. You're saying directly answering the question with a few words or a statement. Okay, so write down those few words or a statement. Try and think of 10 arguments. So one of the arguments might be, and let's number these. Let's use numbered bullet points. One of the arguments is identify root causes of near misses. Okay, there's one argument. If you identify the root causes of near misses, you will correct the causes of near misses. And that will lead to a prevention of further incidents, say, prevention of real incidents, real harm, and a reduction in injuries, say. So that's 4 basic arguments as to why you should investigate near misses. You might be able to come up with some legal arguments as well, financial arguments. There are a few other things to say, but we've got 4 basic arguments. Now, these are your points. You're making these points. Now, to make those points fully, let's add in a bit of further explanation and use some evidence from the scenario. So, for example, if we go to this scenario here, it's been a long time since I've looked at this one, but we have issues around the car park, vehicles reversing out of spaces, narrowly missing pedestrians. So the car park's a little bit of a mess. It seems to be quite congested. Vehicles are parked across existing parked cars, blocking them in, making it hazardous to maneuver. Okay, so that kind of sets the scene as to what we're talking about. So on this argument number 2, we could say, right, we're going to correct the causes of near misses, and then we're going to talk about the car park. So let's rephrase that a little bit. We could say, investigating near misses would help us fix the causes, i.e. the congested. I mean, when we say evidence, all we're asking for really is just references to the scenario to make sure that you're not just giving generic answers which you have stolen from your course materials. That's called plagiarism, by the way. So you could use your course materials, you can take the generic answers, why do we investigate near misses, but then write your answers in a way which refers to the scenario and try to give a little bit of further explanation. Investigating near misses would help us fix the causes, i.e. the congested car park. It would come up with ways to reorganize. Very good. Then that takes us to the next one, prevention of real incidents. So we could say, doing the above would lead to a reduction in incidents. What types of incidents? Well, the ones that are mentioned here. We've got people reversing into each other. We've got people walking into, narrowly missing a fellow worker, angry exchange. We've got minor collisions here. Okay, so we've got doing this would lead to a reduction in incidents such as the minor collisions and potential for reversing into pedestrians. So there we've got a point being made plus some further evidence taken from the scenario. And what's the explanation going to be? Well, I'm tempted to say there's already kind of an explanation there, but if you wanted to add a little bit more, because there's not a lot of text there, let's just add a bit more. What is your explanation going to be? Well, this is actually the hardest part. You have to read the question again. What's the question? The question is asking for what arguments can you give? So we're trying to make an argument. Why should we investigate this car park near miss? So investigating this car park near miss. There we are. Let's answer the question. Investigating this near miss would reduce the minor collisions potential for reversing into pedestrians, because if we fix the causes of the near miss, we should be able to reduce the chances of real accidents in the future. That's all. That's all. That's all you have to say. It's something like that. Fix the cause of this near miss in the car park reduces the chances of real accidents in the future. And you know what I've just thought of? Instead of saying real accidents, why don't we just say something related to the scenario of real collisions in the future? Collision is taken from the scenario. Okay, so that's how we do it. You write your list of points, you try and make your points with some reference to the scenario, and then you add in a bit of further explanation, trying to use examples and language taken directly from the scenario as much as you can. The next question we've got here is from Amjad Khan CM5SM. That's quite the name. What is the proper way to attend IG1 NG1 paper? Is any set of rules to be followed, and are any specific template is present to be followed? Right, okay, great question. Just what are the basic rules, right? What is the proper way of attending? Well, you attend online. It's an online exam. It takes 24 hours. You have 24 hours to do the exam. You will be given login details by NEBOSH 2 weeks before the exam. So look out for those. Once you get your login details, log on, make sure that they work, make sure you can get in to the platform, and then wait for your exam day to arrive. And at the designated time, usually 11 o'clock, but they could change it. At 11 o'clock, you log in and see if you can download the exam paper. Now, NEBOSH have a load of videos showing you how this works. So look up the official NEBOSH YouTube channel. They'll show you how that works. Let me just show you the rules. There are some rules. Yes, there are. At the beginning of your exam paper, you'll download it. It'll look something like this. You have guidance to learners. Right, this has the rules. What does it say? Well, it says some very important stuff, and you should read it because they may change it for your exam. This can be updated, so always read it. It says it's an open book examination, it's not invigilated, and it says you are free to use any learning resources to which you have access, e.g. your course notes or the HC website, etc. Now, to be clear, and they haven't said this on here, but this is part of the plagiarism policy. You are not permitted to use ChatGPT or any other artificial intelligence system, anything that you might have on your laptop or any other website. So none of the Google system, none of the Microsoft system, whatever they're called, I can't remember their names. You're not allowed to use any of them for any reason, for any purpose, not to research your answers, not to, nothing, absolutely nothing. Why? Well, it kind of says so in the next paragraph. It says, by submitting your completed examination for marking, you are declaring it is entirely your own work. Now, using artificial intelligence even for research purposes, it's not going to be your own work. You can use other resources. You can use the HSE website. You can use the Compassa materials. So if you've purchased the Compassa materials, or if you're a Compassa student, you will have access to our book here, which has lots of great resources to help you answer questions. They don't give you the answers to questions because, again, that depends on the scenario, but these are great prompts to help you cobble together the answer. But you are not allowed to plagiarize the internet or course materials or anything like that. It says you must not collaborate with or copy work from others, neither should you cut and paste blocks of text from the internet or other sources. So definitely do not cheat. NEBOSH catch thousands of, and I literally mean thousands of people every single year. So just don't bother. You'll get caught and your result will get voided. What else does it say? It says, it gives you some guidance then, talks about the scenario. You need to do a series of tasks, and you should draw upon relevant information from the scenario when answering your task. So again, it's use of the P principle, use evidence from the scenario. It's not a rule, but that's how you get marks. The marks available are shown in brackets to the right of each question. All right, what does that mean? Well, let's have a look. So there you are. See those numbers there in brackets? Okay, that means that's how many marks there are available. So here it's 10 marks, so we would have to make 10 moral arguments in that particular question there. It recommends that you avoid writing too little, as this will make it difficult for the examiner to award marks. So you're going to have to write fairly decent size answers. I usually recommend to my students 2 to 3 lines per mark. That should guarantee the marks. That might be doing a bit too much in some cases, but it's just enough in some other cases. So just to guarantee that you get the marks, write 2 to 3 lines using point, evident, explanation, and hopefully you'll do fine. Now it says the examination will take you approximately 4 hours to complete. Now, in my experience, having spoken to many hundreds of students about the exam, it's anywhere between 6 to 8 hours in practice. I don't know if that's just my students. I don't think it is. Most people are 8 hours. So plan the full day. It opens at 11 o'clock in the morning, UK time. You're going to be at it all afternoon, all evening, and maybe a little bit on the next day before you submit as well. Now, here's an important bit. It says you are not expected to write more than 3,000 words in total. There is another document on the NEBOSH website, which is a guidance document, and it says in there that you must not write more than 3,000 words plus or minus 10%. So the maximum is, according to that document, 3,300 words. Now that's not what it says here. It's not what it says here. It uses different words. It says you are not expected to. And I think that's entirely accurate. NEBOSH do not expect you to write more than that. You can pass, provided your answers are correct, provided you've expressed yourself specifically and you've articulated your points really well with evidence and explanation, you can pass with 3,000 words. But you're not expected to write more. And yet there are some people who might need to write a bit more. People who might not master the English language quite as well as others, people who need to use more words to explain their point. And there are, in many cases, people might write lots of points which are not actually correct. They're not on the marking scheme. And so by writing more answers, they might write 15 points when only 10 are required. But writing those extra 5 points, which gives more words, that might get them more marks later on. NEBOSH want you to answer the question and not go off onto a different topic, which is very easily done. They want you to stay focused, to stick to the point, stick to the subject at hand. And so this expectation of 3,000 words is there to help you do that. Now, that being said, we have lots of students who write more than that. I've got students every single month writing 4,000, 5,000, some of them 6,000 words. And for the vast majority, they pass. We've got pass rates of over 80% at the moment. Our latest figures are 83% at time of filming. So, and they're writing way more than 3,000 words. So, take that as you will. You are not expected to write more. I interpret that as giving us the freedom to do so if we feel that we have to. But try to comply with the spirit of what's been asked there. Don't Don't write thousands of words for the sake of it. Writing thousands of words of fluff, which is irrelevant to the point, is not going to get you more marks, to be absolutely clear. So that is the proper way of doing the NEBOSH open book exam, and those are the basic rules. The next question I got here is from MOTRNK. Make a video about consider, outline, factors, comment on, approach, etc. and more. How can we answer this type of questions in the scenario? Okay, that's a big question. That sounds like it's about command words. What are the commands? Now, back in the days of the closed book exams, people used to worry a lot about the command words. They used to worry too much about command words. And we used to spend our life explaining the difference between identify, outline, and explain. Now, there are still command words in the NEBOSH exams. Let's take a look at their sample. We've got it here. If we take a look at some of these questions, what have we got here? We've got a prepare notes. We've got what. We've got a comment there. We've got a what again and another comment. Okay, so what, why, and comment, as far as I can tell, are kind of like the main ones. But you might get some other ones like prepare and so on. Listen, nearly all of your answers are going to require use of the P principle, point, evidence, and explanation. Nearly all of them. So if you're making a comment, if you're commenting about something, you could say, hey, this thing they did here was really good because they did this. Use evidence from the scenario, add a bit of an explanation about why it's really good. Bang, you've got 2 to 3 lines. Let's have a look at a question. Comment on the current culture, current health and safety culture in the company. Okay, so let's have a look at that. Comment on. Let's get our Word document here. So if we look at the scenario, comment on the current culture, what have we got? We've got a, the contracts manager has a reputation for being irritable and unapproachable. Only seen when arriving and leaving. Okay, right. So we could say the comment is, one of the negative signs of the culture is management are not very visible. One negative part of the culture is management are not very visible. Right, so that's a point that I'm making. Now let's use some evidence from the scenario to demonstrate that point. The contracts manager is rarely seen. Only when arriving and leaving. Okay, there's my evidence. Now I have to explain something about that. And here, well, why don't I explain why that's a negative? What does that mean? I could say, this is negative because... It's not a very eloquent way of speaking that way, but it's okay. It's like, it gets the marks. This is negative because a positive culture is one where management are visible and involved, taking an interest in how things are done. Okay, there we are. Now, I've said repeatedly in this video, it's about 2 to 3 lines. There we are. If I reduce that to a normal size font at 11, that's 3 lines. Exactly. How many words is that? That's 47 words. Okay, I've probably written a bit too much there. If I took a little bit out, if I take a bit out there, you know, that brings me down to 39 words. It's a bit wordy, but it's fine. That'll get me 1 mark. So when we're asked to comment on things, you have to write a comment, a full comment. It's like, well, this is what's good, this is what's bad. Right, here's some evidence, some references to the scenario, and this is why I think it's good, this is why I think it's bad. So that's comment on. Now, there are there's another word which is used a lot is what. We've got it here. What arguments can you give to convince the committee? We've got it again down here. What formal meetings could you plan that are likely to help improve consultation in the workplace? Now, the what questions might require full answers using the P principle, or maybe not. It depends on the question. If we've got this question here, what formal meetings could you plan? I think you can just get marks with just a list there, a list of formal meetings. We could have a formal one-to-one. We could have formal team meetings. We could have a formal health and safety committee meeting. We could have these are the formal meetings, just a list with like 1 or 2 word answers. Formal team briefings, 3-word answer. There you are. That's a list, but not all what questions can be answered with short lists like that. That previous one, what arguments can you give? Right, this is an argument. Can you make an argument in 3 words? It's difficult, isn't it? It's difficult. When you argue, you're saying more than 3 words. You might have to say, well, investigating the near misses will help us identify the root cause of the near miss. Right, there you go. I've just said like a full sentence there. So when you've got like, what reasons are there? What arguments can you make? What are the consequences? Those types of questions you might have to write quite a bit more. It's not a simple list. If we go back to the initial instructions, which we had here, it said, avoid writing too little, as this will make it difficult for the examiner to award marks. Single word answers or lists are unlikely to gain marks, as this would not normally be enough to show understanding or a connection with the scenario. All right, so normally, even the what questions will require full answers. There may be some exceptions to that, because it does say this would not normally be enough. I think that question at the end there, that what formal meetings, I think that might be an exception. Fairly short answers, 2 or 3 words might do with that one. But if you're unsure, if you're worrying about this, you're worrying, oh, have I written enough? Right, just write more. Just write a full answer then. You could say, have a formal team meeting every week. There's your point. Use some evidence in the scenario. Right, well, the construction manager could gather these people together and they could put the car park issues on the agenda. And that would help brainstorm some ideas from the frontline people on how they could reorganize the car park. There you go. Maybe most of that was unneeded, but you were worried about whether you were saying enough. So just say more. Just say more. Okay, last question in this series of questions here. This is from Santosh Pant, 3374. And he asks, I want to ask a question regarding how to write answer on P basis. So that's principle, evidence, explanation. Not principle, point, evidence, explanation of forklift truck case scenario of negative influence of individual behavior. Right, so, well, whatever the answer is going to depend on the scenario. Now, I don't quite know what the question is here. It's a little bit unclear to me. It sounds like it might be a question about what negative influence was put on the forklift truck driver or something, or what role did peer pressure, influence from peers, what role did that play on a forklift accident, something like that. And so it's a question which is testing your understanding of how people could positively or negatively influence others in the workplace. And well, that's going to depend on the scenario. So one of the things that you would do, and I don't have this scenario, I don't know which scenario this is, so I can't show it, and it's confidential anyway. But if we take the NEBOSH sample here, we could read through this sample and identify possible answers to the question. So this question here, it says comment on the current health and safety culture. You might be able to find some answers within the scenario on what the culture's like. And so if we just have a quick look, I'll just highlight some of them. We've got a contracts manager as a reputation for being irritable and unapproachable. We could talk about that. The manager is occasionally abusive if interrupted. We could talk about that. We could talk about the only seen when arriving and leaving. Right? Let's talk about that. So when you're answering this question about the forklift truck and the negative influence that others had on the accident, look through the scenario to see what influence was there. Have we got colleagues who are not taking safety seriously? Have we got colleagues laughing at people who behave safely? Have we got managers who are dismissive of safety? Managers who downplay safety risks? Managers who encourage people to cut corners to get work done? All of this is influenced by others in the organization. Look for that in your scenario, and if you explain that using the P principle, hopefully you will get the marks. There you are, my friends. So I've covered a number of different questions there on both NG1 and NG2. I hope that has been helpful. If you've got any more questions about any of this, please drop them in the comments below. I'll try to answer as best as I can. And whenever you are sitting your assessments, I wish you the absolute best of luck. If you do need any additional help on your NEBOSH assessments, please go to our website. We've got a ton of information here on our website. If you go to the NEBOSH section on compassa.co.uk, go to the NEBOSH page, and you can go on to exam resources there, and you'll find all of our exam resources which you can buy at a very reasonable price. We've got study books, we've got exam technique books, we've got prep courses to help you prepare for the exam or prepare for NG2. And we've even got the NEBOSH Rescue package there for National General Certificate students. You can be rescued and sign up to us for a very, very discounted price and get the access to our tutor support to get you through the examination and the NG2. So on that basis, hasta la vista, baby. Let me know how you get on.